If you have a Bible, it'd be very helpful to have Nehemiah chapter 6 and Nehemiah chapter 7 open. I know many of you will know this, but in the English language, painting the fourth bridge has come to mean undertaking a task that is never actually finished. And that's because of the belief that when the painters complete this 1.5 mile Scottish bridge, they've got to start all over again after completing the work. So on the one hand, the task has been completed, the bridge is gleaming bright, but on the other hand, there is more to be done. In some ways, that's a parable for gospel work. There are moments when a gospel work reaches what we might call a point of completion. Missionaries are called, a pastor is installed, elders are appointed, a church plant becomes independent, the bridge is painted, but there is always much more to do after that. It's a parable of our Christian journey as well. Our baptism, if I can put it this way, is very often the culmination of maybe years of God working in our hearts, changing us, bringing us to the truth. And the bridge is gleaming bright, but there is so much further to go, isn't there, after baptism? I say that to our young Christians here this morning. New graces to put on. Patience, kindness, and old sins to put away. Is that right? So the work is never done. Well, by the end of today's account, in Nehemiah chapter 6, the walls of Jerusalem have finally been completed. Verse 15, did you catch that when Dot was reading it? So the wall was completed on the 25th of Elul in 52 days. An incredible effort. Just in 52 days, those walls were rebuilt. A wonderful milestone. The workers are overjoyed. The toil has been rewarded. The city has been made safe. Prayers have been answered. Singers appointed. And importantly, enemies downcast. When all our enemies heard about this, all the surrounding nations were afraid. And they lost their self-confidence because they realized that this work had been done with the help of God. God had been glorified through this project. His power, his protection, his provision had been made known to the world. And God was glorified as the work completed. But I hope you also notice that although the bridge is painted, Nehemiah could not put his feet up. Because as soon as the bridge was completed, there was more work to be done. There was more opposition to face. Did you come across that? Verses 17 to 19 and chapter 7. More work to be done. Gatekeepers and priests and guards and governors to appoint. And very much more. So, brothers and sisters, this morning, I want to tell you, Christians are fourth bridge people. Our work and our battles and our victories in this life are never finished. I found a friend, oh, such a friend. All power to him is given to guard me on my onward course and bring me safe to heaven. The eternal glories gleam afar to nerve, to strengthen my faint endeavor. And how does that verse end? But now, to watch, to work, to war, and then, and only then, to rest forever. Well, when chapter 6 opens, and if you're new to us, we're making our way through. Is that me, or is that you, Joshua? 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Testing? We there? Testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay. So when chapter 6 opens, the walls are completed. Joshua, let's just do first of all, try this one. Oh, you're going to try a new battery. Folks, just talk among yourselves. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Is that working? Testing, 1, 2, 3. Louder, Joshua, so I don't have to shout. Nothing at all, just those folks. That's because I was off. I think that's 12 to me and 0 to you. Okay, is that better? Too good. Okay. Let's go back to our notes. Okay, so chapter 6, if you're new, we're making our way through Nehemiah, little by little, and the walls are completed, but the gates have yet to be hung. So verse 2, not a gap was left in the walls, though up to that time I had not set the doors in the gates. Now, can you just imagine a city? All the walls are built, but no gates yet. And God's enemies realize that this is their very last opportunity to prevent the walls from being completed. Once the gates are fixed, that's it. The city is secure. Now, what we have noticed is that if buses come in threes, enemies come in fours. Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem, we're used to those names now, aren't we? And the men of Ashdod. Behind all those four enemies is one invisible enemy, and that is Satan. And this morning we are going to discover that Satan's third strategy against God's people, we're going to discover what it is. I want to just pause there and say to all of you who are involved in gospel work that Satan opposes everything that God does. He opposes the work of godliness in your own life. If you're growing as a Christian, adding graces, putting to death sins, you can be sure Satan will oppose every step forward as you move towards being more Christ-like by the power of the Holy Spirit. And whatever outreach we do here at Manor Park, we must expect opposition. It's normal. I was just thinking about that this week and thinking explorers, trailblazers, connect, seniors and more, Malvern, I know it's Malvern Mission, we are to expect opposition. It's normal. Opposition to God's work is normal. Now, I wonder whether a brave soul this morning might just say out loud, so far we've discovered two ways in which Satan attacks the church. Is anyone going to be brave enough to say what those are? Because we've got a third one this morning. But what were the two ways so far? Right throughout the book of Acts, right throughout the scriptures, two ways in which Satan attacks God's people. Martin, you are whispering to your dear wife. Do you have the answer?
From without and from within.
Brilliant. So from without, persecution, it's a very blunt instrument, put them in prison, kill them. And then from what within, God's people, discouragement, division. Do you remember that? The rich against the poor a couple weeks ago. If a fox climbs on your wall, it will collapse. Do you remember that one? Discourage them. The stuff you're doing, the work you're doing is pathetic. It really is. Well, this morning we learned that Satan has a third strategy, and that is to attack the leader himself, to attack Nehemiah. If Nehemiah can be removed from the project at this crucial stage, the walls will remain unfinished and the city in danger. So, brothers and sisters, I want you to watch with me Satan's third strategy and the tactics he uses to remove Nehemiah from the scene. And maybe some of you here this morning are saying, well, how is that going to be relevant to me? Some of you are leaders, and so you need to hear this. Some of you will be leaders in the future, and so you need to hear that. But Satan uses the same tricks on all of us. So sometimes he uses these tricks on leaders, but very often all of God's people experience the same kind of attacks. So to be forewarned this morning is to be forearmed. Let's look at the three tactics. Tactic number one, let's kill him. Do you read that at the end of verse 2? They were scheming to harm me. Now, when Nehemiah says harm me, he does not mean these hardened enemies are just going to biff him on the nose and let him go. Oh no, they want to take him out and kill him and get him off the scene. Now, the email they sent to Nehemiah was ever so friendly. This is how it went. Come, let us meet together in one of the villages on the plain of Ono. Now, in modern parlance, that means, come on, let's grab a latte at Cafe Costa Ono. That's what they're saying. Come on, guys, let's have a nice little cappuccino together in this little cafe on the plains of Ono. Except that Ono is a long way away from the security of Jerusalem. Except that Ono is close to enemy territory. And Nehemiah smells a rat. And this is what he says: I'm carrying on a great project, and I cannot go down. Why should the work stop while I leave and go down to you? Basically, I'm really busy, guys. Thanks for the invite. Thanks for the coffee offer. But I'm far too busy. I'm doing a great work here. He doesn't mean that in a proud way. He's got this great project, building the walls, and so I can't stop. I can't come to you. Sorry. Now, I want you to notice the enemies do not give up. 4 times they come back to him and they say, come to Ono, come to Ono, come to Ono, come to Ono. And you know, brothers and sisters, that's how Satan works with all of us, isn't it? He tries to tempt us again and again and again and again. Is that right? Doesn't give up with us? And James 4:7 has a wonderful promise for us. It says, resist the devil and he will flee from us. It's exactly what Nehemiah does. He says, no the first time, no the second, no the third, and no the fourth. Now, the 5th time he comes, the 5th time Sanballat comes, he doesn't come himself, he sends this time a personal assistant. I assume beforehand it was just a messenger. But the 5th time, so he's already tried 4 times, and Nehemiah is not going to the plains of Ono. The 5th time, he ups the pressure by sending his personal assistant, verse 5. And he employs a brand new tactic. The assistant had an unsealed letter with him. Do you know what that means? In those days, a letter would have a seal on it with a wax and an imprint of the person sending it. And nobody could open that letter except the recipient. But Sanballat sends an unsealed letter. Do you know the meaning of that? Everyone can read the contents of this on the way to the journey. Everybody in Jerusalem can read it before Nehemiah gets his hands on it. It's like printing a letter in the Guardian or the Times or the Telegraph or the Daily Mail. Come on, what do you guys read? I don't know. Probably don't read any of those anymore, do we? It's an app on our phones. Okay? So let me read this letter that appeared in the Times. It is reported, unsealed letter. Everyone can read this. Deliberate. It's reported among the nations, and Geshem says it's true, as if that really would have mattered to Nehemiah, that you and the Jews are plotting to revolt and therefore you are building the wall. Moreover, according to these reports, you're about to become their king, and you've even appointed prophets to make this proclamation about you in Jerusalem. There is a king in Judah. Now this report will get back to the king, so come, let us confer together. The first tactic is to harm Nehemiah and kill him and literally get him out the way. The second tactic is to spread lies about Nehemiah. The real reason Nehemiah is rebuilding those walls is because he has a secret ambition to move up from being governor, who you appointed, to king of all of Judah. Spread those lies around Judah. And you know that little phrase, there's no smoke without fire? Do you know that little phrase? So hopefully the lie will travel all around Judah, and some people will think, yeah, I think probably Nehemiah, he's not happy just to be a governor. He is plotting to be a king. And it's designed to put pressure on Nehemiah to take up that offer at Costa Ona. Come, let's confer together and wear him out. They were all trying to frighten us, thinking their hands will get too weak for the work and it will not be completed. How did Nehemiah respond to this attack? Let me just say this. It's always the same with Nehemiah. He acts and he prays. He acts and he prays. And he prays and he acts and he acts and he prays. He doesn't just act. He doesn't just pray. He acts and he prays. And he acts and he prays. The action is he sent Sanballat the reply, nothing like what you are saying is happening. I love this. You are just making it all up out of your head. You're just telling a big pack of fat lies. That's the action, and here's the prayer. Now strengthen my hands. Many of Nehemiah's prayers are really short. Short prayers are okay, folks. Those arrow prayers which we might pray. We don't need to pray really long prayers are okay, folks. But so are short ones. Now strengthen my hands. Lord, help me. So Sanballat's first attempt to take Nehemiah out the way to kill him has failed. His second tactic, to spread lies about him, has failed. And so now he tries tactic number 3, which is to assassinate Nehemiah's character. I can just hear the 4 frustrated and desperate enemies conferring. We're getting absolutely nowhere here, folks. We need to change tack, because that's what they did with Jesus, didn't they? They all conferred, the enemies. We're not getting anywhere here. What are we going to do? I know what we'll do. We'll tempt Nehemiah to sin. We'll get him to do something that's bad and wrong, and then we'll spread that slander all over Jerusalem. So they hatched a plan, a very cunning plan. They found and paid a prophet. Oh, that's interesting. Shemaiah. The last guy you'd think, maybe even a friend of Nehemiah's, because it says Nehemiah went to his house. We're not too sure. They found a bloke called Shemaiah. They paid him some money. And he's a prophet, he is either an enemy or he's an innocent, gullible man who could be bought. And they say something like this to him: pretend you can't leave your house. Make up any excuse. Then Nehemiah will be obliged to come to your house. And when he comes, tell him that you've heard about all these plots to kill you and these assassins that are ready to kill you at night. And you better run to the temple, lock the doors, and hide yourself there. And I'll come with you. Well, what's wrong with that? No one was allowed in the temple except the priests. So this trick is to get Nehemiah to commit a sin by going into the temple, locking the gates, doing what he was not allowed to do. And then they tell everybody, look, Nehemiah's a wicked man. If it had worked, the enemies would have spread the slander. Nehemiah, your leader, is a lawbreaker and a sinner. Killing hadn't worked. Spreading lies had not worked. So let's assassinate his character. Now, how did Nehemiah respond? I mean, what are you expecting? He acts and he prays. His actions are this. He says to Shemaiah, should a man like me run away, in effect? I'm no coward. Should I run away if these assassins are coming after me? I've got a job. God's given me this job. I'm not running away. And then secondly, should a man like me go into the temple to save his life? No. A man like me, I'm not a priest. I'm not allowed in the temple. I will not go. I realized that God had not sent him, but that he had prophesied against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. He'd been hired to intimidate me so that I would commit a sin by doing this, and they would give me a bad name to discredit me. What about the prayer? Nehemiah is a man with a heroic spirit, but he also is a man for whom arrows did wound. And so he prayed, remember Tobiah and Sanballat, oh my God, because of what they have done. Remember also the prophets of Noadiah and the rest of the prophets who've been trying to intimidate me. He acted and he prayed, and he prayed and he acted. So brothers and sisters, where are we? Satan could not stop the work by outward persecution. Sanballat and co. having an army to try and attack Jerusalem. Satan could not destroy the work by internal discouragement and division. And so he turned to strategy 3. We're going to try and attack Nehemiah himself. Kill him? Didn't work. Spread lies about him? Didn't work. Assassinate his character? Did not work. And none of these attacks worked, because nothing, brothers and sisters, can stop the plans and purposes of God. Do you believe that? Absolutely nothing can stop the purposes and plans of Almighty God. And so Nehemiah emerges. In my notes here it says unscathed from the battle. I'm not sure he was unscathed. I think he wore internal wounds from the battle. But he came out and the walls were completed. I want to stop here and just ask this question, because this applies to all of us. How should you or I respond to lies and slander? Because Jesus said it's likely to happen to all of his followers. Blessed are you when people falsely say all kinds of evil against you. If you're a faithful Christian, wherever you are, it's likely that at some point lies will be told about you. And I think as our Western culture darkens and your light shines brighter, this is going to become more and more true. So I'm going to ask you this morning, when people lie and slander you, what should you do? I know the human instinct, it's to defend ourselves or retaliate. Is that right? Is that the human instinct? Defend yourself. I didn't say that. I didn't do that. Or worse, retaliate. And to fight fire with fire. But brothers and sisters, that is never ever the Jesus way to respond to slander and lies. Jesus said we must pray for our enemies, Matthew 5, and we must overcome evil with good, Romans 13. I'm not saying these are easy things, but this is what Jesus would have us do. When lies and slander are spoken against us, we are to love and pray for our enemies, and we are to overcome that evil with good. Can I just give you 3 ways I think we should all respond if we are lied or slandered, lied about or slandered? First of all, use it to humble ourselves. use slander and lies as an opportunity to humble ourselves. Spurgeon, he once quipped this. He said, if someone thinks ill of you, do not be angry with him, for you are worse than he thinks you to be. You got that one? Someone says something wicked about you, you know full well you're far more wicked than what that person has said about you. Is that right? So don't let it worry you. Don't be angry with him, for you are worse than he thinks you to be. Number one. Number two, and this is the hardest thing I'm going to say to you, say nothing. You say, where do you get that from in the Bible? What did Jesus do during his trials? Shall I read Matthew to you, 27? Jesus made no reply, not even to a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor. Matthew 27:14. When someone spreads lies or slander about you, say nothing. I've heard this said, silence can't be misquoted. Which is true, isn't it? What if you respond to slander or lies? Do you know what will happen? You will begin an eternal spiral of tit for tat. Have you been listening? Was it last year? Rooney says this, or rather his wife, about Vardy. And Vardy's wife then listens to what Rooney's wife has said, and Vardy's wife says this about Rooney's wife. Rooney, Vardy, backwards and forwards forever until it ends up in the courts. Really difficult, the second one, isn't it? Say absolutely nothing in defense of yourself. And thirdly, even more importantly, pray. Commit your ways to God. Commit justice to God. Is that right? One day he'll sort all that stuff out. Don't take it into your own hands. Say nothing. Number one, humble yourself. You are probably far worse in actuality than what that person is saying about you. Number two, say nothing. Don't defend yourself. And number three, commit your ways to the Lord. Now, what does the Holy Spirit want us to learn from these verses? I've just got a few things here. I've prayed all this week that he would speak to each one of us individually, and then layered on top of that, I think there are three takeaways we must observe from this morning's sermon from Nehemiah 6 and 7. Number one is a reminder to the church. Pray for your leaders. Okay, I'm sorry I put you all up there. All our elders, a photograph only made acceptable by the presence of the wives. Is that right? So there we go. There are the 7 elders who God has called to lead us. We're not perfect, but God has called us. I love the way, did you notice that? How did Nehemiah choose Hananiah? He chose him because he was a man of integrity and he feared God more than most men do. How do we appoint elders at Manor Park? Because they're clever? Because they're wealthy? Because they have contacts? None of those things matter to us at all. The only thing that matters is that they fulfill the qualifications of 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1, and they're men of integrity and godliness. And I want you guys to pray for them. Did you hear this week that Zelensky was almost killed by a Russian missile? Yeah, the world knows if you knock the leader out and the leaders out, you win the war. Is that right? That's why Hitler had those tanks that were virtually bomb-proof, those trains that were virtually bomb-proof. Even evil men know to protect themselves. In Acts chapter 4, it's Peter and John. the first church leaders who were put in prison. In Acts 7, Deacon Stephen is stoned to death, and so it goes on. Church leaders are in the firing line like no one else. So would you please pray for Peter, Jels, Mike Wilson, Brendan Scanlon, Gwilym Batchelder, John Coleman, Peter Oram, and for myself. I remember, I've told you the story again, forgive me, I was preaching in a little church up in Thornthwaite, up north in Yorkshire, North Yorkshire, and I used to preach there regularly on a Sunday afternoon. They had to meet at 2 o'clock because they were farmers. They couldn't meet in the morning like everyone else. So 2 o'clock, little service, I'd go down often to preach. And one little lady said to me, I don't know what the setting was, she said, I pray for you every single day. I was amazed. I was just a visiting preacher. But she must have had a little list of people she prayed for every day. And little old me was on her list. Do you pray for your elders? And if not, may I encourage you to do that. We're very blessed here at Manor Park with a happy, united church, but I'm very conscious as we reach out to students, I'm very conscious as we, by God's grace, reach out to Malvern, I'm conscious that Satan's not happy with those things. So pray for your leaders. Secondly, here's a lesson in discernment. Test the spirits. I don't know if you've noticed, but Nehemiah has an uncanny ability to spot the enemies and the schemes of the enemies. A very remarkable insight. He sensed that invitation to Cafe Ono was a plot, so he doesn't go. A less wise man might have said, oh, well, they're nice guys. They're asking me for a coffee. I'm going to go. Oh, not wise Nehemiah. He knows the purpose of that invitation. He discerns the purpose of the rumors about himself wanting to be the king of Judah. He knows what it's all about. He knew Shemaiah's claim about assassins plotting to kill him was a pack of lies designed to tempt him to sin. And I'm going to ask you the question this morning, where did Nehemiah get such discernment? The human source is that Nehemiah had been trained in the courts of great King Artaxerxes. Just think about it. He had witnessed political intrigue at the highest level for years. And I think by comparison, Sanballat and Tobiah were backwater, bungling, rustic amateurs, probably. He probably saw right through them, humanly speaking. His background had prepared him for this moment. But I'll tell you the divine source, the main source of Nehemiah's discernment was the spiritual gift of discernment. Paul lists distinguishing between spirits as a gift of the Holy Spirit, 1 Corinthians 12, verse 10. Have you come across people who are especially discerning spiritually? My mother was one of those. She was, as you know, a missionary, pastor's wife, evangelist, and she had the ability to see things that other people could not see. I can remember many examples, but I'll give you this one. When I was a teenager, a man kept visiting the house, and he kept asking my dad for money. And every time he came with a different sob story as to why he needed the money. And my dad took pity on him and gave him money, probably far too much of it. But my mum sensed something was amiss. And I don't think that was just the feminine sixth sense. You know, women do have a kind of sixth sense, don't they? Is that right? Blokes? I'm looking for the blokes to say yes or no. They do. Women do have a sense. Oh no, it was something more than that. And so it turned out to be, he was an illegal immigrant. And she sensed something was amiss long before my dad ever did. Dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits. Do you know, some Christians are so gullible. Is that right? You come upon Christians who are so easily led astray. Test the spirits to see whether they come from God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world, writes the Apostle John. Brothers and sisters, if you're looking for wisdom and discernment today, maybe there's a person or a situation, maybe there's someone in this room, and you're looking for wisdom and discernment about a person or a situation in your life, I'd say to you two things. I'd say number one is seek the counsel of other godly Christians, because wisdom is only found in a multiplicity of counselors. You make decisions on your own without asking other people, and they're likely to be faulty. And number two, go to James chapter 1, verse 5, and claim this promise. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to him. God will give you abundance of wisdom if you ask him. So Nehemiah's wisdom came from on high. So there's a reminder to the church, pray for your elders, a lesson in discernment, test the spirits. But I think the greatest takeaway from these verses is the triumph of God's people and God's purposes. The walls were rebuilt in a record 52 days against all the opposition of Sanballat and his crew. When all our enemies heard about this, all the surrounding nations were afraid and lost their self-confidence because they realized that the work had been done with the help of our God. So as a church, we do not need ever to fear the future. Satan will attack, and no doubt with renewed vigor as we reach out to Malvern. But we go forth in confidence, not in ourselves, but in the Lord and his mighty strength. 1,000 will flee at the threat of one, Isaiah 30. One of you will rout 1,000 because the Lord your God fights for you, Joshua 23. And brothers and sisters, as I close, we know this for sure, because 2,000 years ago, all the hosts of hell joined together to oppose God's Messiah. Is that right? All the nations conspired together, Psalm 2. And what happened? He rose triumphantly from the dead. Yes, they did kill him, but that was God's will, that through his death we might be forgiven. And he rose on the third day triumphantly, and you and I share in his victory. So I don't know what it is this morning that is troubling you. What is it that's troubling you? What weakness, what frailty? And you feel, I'll never be victorious. I want to say to you that the story of Nehemiah, chapters 1 to 7, are that in spite of all the opposition, God's good purposes are completed. The good work he has begun in you, he will bring to completion. And all the good plans he has for us as a company of God's people, he will certainly fulfill. And we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. To him alone be the glory. Amen.